Green Day is here with a brand new album. It's been leaked for a while, so I've heard it. It's not officially out at the uploading of this video, and I've listened to it a bunch. What happened? For real. I mean, if you watch my review of their latest single, Oh Yeah, you probably will get a good idea of how I feel about this album and why it gets me as angry as it does. Green Day is one of my all-time favorite bands. They are one of my top 3 favorite bands, and at this point in their career, nothing they can do will actually change that. Because, I've said it before, I'll say it again, after American Idiot, I just feel that their material in general is a lot bumpier. Doesn't necessarily mean it's all bad. Like 21st Century Breakdown, I'm not a huge fan of. I appreciate the concept, but I'm not a huge fan of the execution. The trilogy was a bloated mess, even though I feel like at its core there's a good amount of decent tunes that would have made up one good album, which is kind of like what happened on Demolicious. And Revolution Radio was a return to form. It was far from great in my opinion. I'd say it's a 6 out of 10. There are definitely some bangers. Bang Bang, Revolution Radio, Somewhere Now are all really strong songs, but there are some duds on there, such as the song Ordinary World, which I'm not too crazy about. Either way, I don't think Green Day has topped their original 7 albums, from 39 Smooth to American Idiot, but I don't think all their new material has been bad. So don't think that I'm just going to give this album a negative review because it's different. So many bands, including Green Day, have done things differently over their career and done it well. Nimrod was a change from the whole Dookie Insomniac style they were having. There was literally Time of Your Life, Good Riddance, which is a first for them to do an acoustic song like that, and it was well executed and was a big hit. American Idiot was a huge change in direction. Them actually making a rock opera was a big step in a new direction for them, and it was executed very well, and is one of their most praised albums. Father of All is definitely a bold step in a new direction, but it is not executed that well, and is arguably my least favorite Green Day album. And I know the dislike ratio is going to be high because this is a Green Day video, and a lot of Green Day fans like to blindly support them. But I will go in depth into why I'm not a fan of this album. The first thing we heard from this album was the song Father of All, which I felt iffy about from the start when I first heard it. I appreciated the instrumentation. I liked the drums, I liked the bass, and I even liked the guitar. But what threw me off was the lack of good lyrics, the bland production, and the vocal delivery by Billy. You couldn't even recognize his voice, and it wasn't even like it was a really good falsetto. It was a heavily distorted, very weak-sounding falsetto. The chorus and the hook of the song ended up growing on me, and I don't despise the song. I actually think it's one of the better songs on this album. But they followed it up with Fire Ready Aim, which is definitely one of the least interesting singles they've ever dropped in their entire career. Not only does it rehash the same exact melody, pretty much, and key and tempo as Father of All, it's produced the same. The vocals aren't that different. The structure isn't that different. It feels like I'm just listening to the same exact song, but even more bland. And then, more recently, they followed it up with Oh Yeah, which, like I said, was my least favorite one to date. I think that it's very bland, there's not much interesting going on, and it sounds like a distorted, pumped-up kicks in many instances. So going into this album, it's safe to say I was not as excited as I wish I would have been. Green Day has the potential to record something great. I mean, Billy's project, The Long Shot, was definitely a really strong independent project from him. So I was hoping that maybe the rest of the album would be a little bit more down those lines, But let me start with the positives, because I don't want to be completely negative. The pros, I actually think, is the length of the album. I think the album does have a lot of flaws, and I think it was a smart choice of them to keep this album short. Any longer than 25 minutes, I may have lost my mind and been even more disappointed. At least what they did was really short, and it's over with. And another thing I want to bring up for a pro is the instrumentation. I think the actual instruments, the drums and the bass, are definitely at the forefront a lot of the time. I think it's nice to hear Mike Dirnt having a more lead role, because honestly, ever since 2004, he's been much more just laid back. It's compared to like Dookie and Kerplunk, his bass playing there is spectacular. And it's not that he's not talented anymore. It's just he hasn't really let loose. And I appreciate that he let loose a bit more on this album. And I will give them a pro for the fact that this is a bold step for them to go this far out of their comfort zone. I'll give them that. I'm not going to take that away from them. That's not why I'm giving this a negative review. And also, just lastly, I will say some of these songs are catchy. I don't, hate these songs, all of them, to the point where it's I don't even want to listen to them ever again. There are definitely a few that I enjoy. But from now, I'm just going to be talking mainly for the negative. First off, the production on this thing is horrible. There's nothing that I could say that's great about this production. Not only is the drums so compressed to the point where you could barely tell the difference between the snare and the tom drums, the guitars are so just dry sounding and just so up front to the point where it drowns out so many other things. You could barely hear the vocals when they're being sung. They're so buried in the mix. And almost every bass track on this thing has some distortion on it, as does the vocals, to the point where it takes away from the experience, and it kind of ruins the fact that there is good instrumentation on here when it's produced so poorly. And the production, as well as the poor songwriting, makes this whole thing feel bland. Just doesn't feel like anything unique to Green Day. This sounds like a B-sides compilation from The Strokes or the White Stripes, more raw, heavy stuff. It doesn't sound like anything I would expect from Green Day, even if they were going in a different direction. And this kind of goes with my next point. The lyrics and the quality of this thing are tremendously weak. And like I said, the quality of these songs, half of these songs sound like they could be in an iPod commercial. And lyrically, you can't even hear the lyrics half the time. And when you do, they're very cliche, just like Green Day lyrics that you'd get from a word cloud. I mean, Oh Yeah is a great example of that. But one of the songs that I actually do like a little more due to the instrumentation has horrible lyrics. The I Was a Teenager song, okay, I get it. You want to reminisce of your youth and relate to the young people, but you're not 16, and it's I know you have the capability to write good songs, and you could write good songs about being young. On 2016's Revolution Radio, the song Outlaws was clearly about being a youth, and it was written in a really clever way, which I enjoyed, and the song was decent. But that song is just... the lyrics, man, I don't even know where to start. And half these lyrics don't seem like they're personal to him or to anybody. They don't even really have much of a statement. And I get it. They want to make more party fun songs. That's fine and all. But, I've heard party songs with better lyrics. And the vocals I will bring up again, because it's really bothersome. Billy Joe Armstrong has never been the world's greatest singer, but he has a very recognizable voice, and is one of the most influential vocalists of the past 20 years, or 30 years for that matter. And I find it ironic that some of their earlier albums has stronger vocal performances than their past, 5 albums. And this one takes the cake for being the worst. If he wants to change up his vocal style, I'm all for that. But you need to do it in a way, in a territory in which you're strong, and his falsetto on this album is not that strong, and it sounds shaky in many spots, and the distortion takes away from the actual natural quality of it. That's my personal opinion. And also, a lot of this feels very unoriginal. I feel like I've heard these songs before from other artists, and it's problematic for me because Green Day has always had a unique sound. Even if it has been a basic, more punk, more pop sound, they've always stood out to me as being one of the, front runners in this style of music. But them diving deep into this more garage rock sound, which is very similar to Dose, another album, which I think was previously their worst, it's just unoriginal, uninspired, too. I don't feel like they're as into it as he says he is. I feel like a lot of that's for the promotion. And lastly, for the big con, is the whoa, whoa, or the whoa. How many times are you going to have to go whoa throughout this song, throughout this album? I love the band Waves. I love these kind of surfy type groups when that's their main focus and they execute it well. But Green Day just sounds like they're ripping off these kind of artists and just throwing it in there because it's trendy, it's fun. And it kind of kills the songs. These backing vocals are horrendous. On the song "Meet Me on the Roof," it starts off promising with like a guitar riff. The clapping is a little annoying, but then you get these backing vocals like coming out of nowhere, and it's just so it's in the front of the mix. Like that's the main thing you hear when the backing vocals come in, and it hurts your ears. It's not pleasant. It's not pleasant. You know, I guess if I were to say some of my favorite songs, this opening single, "Father of All," is a decent track. You know, it's grown on me a good amount. I feel like the instrumentation is decent, even if the vocals aren't that great. "Junkies on a High," I do think is an actually relatively decent song, even if it does sound unoriginal. I think that, you know, the music, the actual lyrics, it's one of the better ones. I think that "Junkies on a High" is a decent song. And despite my hatred for some of these lyrics, "I Was a Teenager" is catchy, a bit more what I want to hear from them. But for my least favorite songs, "Fire, Ready, Aim," and "Oh Yeah" are some of the least interesting singles I've heard from one of my favorite bands. "Stab You in the Heart" just reuses the old riffs that they were using on "Dose," and it just sounds like any other blues and like 50s rock inspired song that so many bands end up doing when they get to this age. And the song "Graffita" is just it's very corny. There ain't much good to say about it, in my opinion. You know, I hate being this negative when reviewing one of my top 3 favorite bands. You know, I hate having such a negative review. But I've sat through this album quite a few times. I have a hard time being optimistic listening to it, and I've ultimately settled on giving this album a decent 3. A decent 3. That's lower than "Dose," and "Dose" was my least favorite album of theirs. "Dose" is at least a 4 for me, because at least it has that Green Day sound. At least they seemed like they were into it. I'm sorry for anybody that enjoys this album. This isn't meant to attack you or your opinions. This is just how I feel and my disappointment in probably one of my favorite bands I've ever listened to. That's about it for now. "Father of All," an unfortunate, a very disappointing, decent 3. That's it. Hopefully Ozzy and all my other favorite artists that are putting music out do a better job.